Hi, it's Roz, and this should be one of my kind of regular scallydandle videos, talking about a book, in this case from Guinea-Bissau, it's called The Ultimate Tragedy by Abdulai Sila. It's the first novel to be translated into English and published from Guinea-Bissau, which is a small country in West Africa. Now, this isn't going to be exactly that video this week, because this week we all have very much in our minds the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been, I was going to say, given a new lease of life. That is really the wrong turn of phrase. I'll try and put it better. Has been galvanised by the tragedy with George Floyd in a way that is very appropriate, because these things happen again and again, and it's really important that they don't pass as if they're normal, whether in the US or in the UK, or anywhere in the world, but those are the places that it's most kind of close to home or obvious to me, I guess. So that's kind of, I think, for a lot of booktubers, has coloured how we feel about recording videos at the moment. It's that thing of like, is it okay to just be talking about books when huge things are happening in the world? Well, actually, the truth is that huge things happen in the world all the time, and yes, it's okay to talk about books. And I know for me that reading is one of the key ways that I get some kind of perspective beyond my own experience, and yeah, I think it's one way that we can, how to say, explore our unconscious bias, which is so embedded in us if we're white, that yeah, there's a value, I think, to me, in reading diversely, shall we say, and it's something that I very positively try and do. And that's, but then in a week like this, you find yourself thinking, well, who cares? Who cares if I manage to be like a little bit more aware about my own, deeply embedded racist attitudes or white privilege? Maybe reading kind of a diverse selection of authors just helps me feel more comfortable with my white privilege. Yeah, you find out you've got all these things going around in your head, haven't you? However, I am still going to talk about The Ultimate Tragedy, but I'm also going to talk about Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which is the other book that I've read in this past week, and feels very timely, I suppose. I was glad to be reading it at this point. So, The Ultimate Tragedy. Not my choice of name. Strange name in a way for this book. It's a novel by really interesting man by the sounds of it, Abdulai Sila. He's still alive. He wrote it in 1995 or 6. Let me look. Yeah, 1996. But it was only translated into English in 2017. But he's written 3 novels, and the first of those 3 novels was the first novel to be published in Guinea-Bissau. So he's not only the first Guinea-Bissauan author to be translated into English. He was the first published novelist in Guinea-Bissau. He's actually an engineer by trade. He runs a computing company. Well, actually, it sounds like he's kind of taken quite a key role in establishing information and communication technologies in Guinea-Bissau. It's a very small country, less than 2 million people. Senegal above it and Guinea beneath it. It was a Portuguese colony until they kind of fought for their independence in 1973. It was recognised in 1974. Interesting history as a country, because it was part of the great empire of Mali, Great Malian Empire, and then the Kabu kind of empire, which went from the 16th right up to the 19th century. But at the same time, the Portuguese always had, not always, from the sort of 16th century onwards, had trading posts on the coast. And yeah, they grabbed it in the Great Scramble for Africa, as it's sometimes called. So, yeah, small, interesting country, interesting writer. Obviously, he... something that comes up, I guess, when I do these, read these novels that are maybe like the first one to be published in translation, is that you sometimes do get the impression that the person writing that novel was very positively thinking about what does it mean to write a Guinea-Bissau novel. What am I trying to do? What am I trying to achieve? What messages am I trying to give? So it's not, you know, you don't just get to write whatever novel you fancy. Maybe if you're in that position of being one of the first authors from your country, you know, he is explicitly examining the his country's history in his novels. As I understand it, one of the other two that haven't yet been translated is looks at kind of post-independence politics, in effect, in Guinea-Bissau, and this one is very much about the sort of period of Portuguese control, and kind of the period kind of not that long before independence. And for that reason, it's really interesting. It's not a perfect novel, I have to say. And this is where it's interesting how, like, this week it feels really crass to be saying, oh, this person's done a terribly good thing writing a novel about his culture and country and the Portuguese kind of colonial behaviour, you know, but it's not actually that good, so, you know, but I'll be nice about it. And it feels terribly patronising, doesn't it? Which is why I'm sort of struggling a bit with talking about it this week, perhaps more than usual. Maybe I should always feel like that. I do always feel a bit like that. I'm kind of, you know, you have to cut someone a bit of slack when they're people, they're the first novelists to get published in their own country. Okay, you do. It is well worth reading. One interesting thing is that he makes a positive choice again, I think, to he writes in like three different voices in this book, and one of them is a woman, and he obviously wants to address a sort of female experience in Guinea-Bissau at that time, you know, and she experiences being raped by her white Portuguese employer, and then it goes through a forced marriage to a kind of like a regulo, like it's kind of like a chief leader type person in a village, more in the hinterland, and then she does find a happy marriage with someone, and he basically he ends up being arrested for hitting a white man, a Portuguese man. So, but curiously, I would have to say that voice doesn't ring that true. So you feel like it's kind of like the intentions were good, but the male characters' voices are much more convincing somehow. And yeah. As I say, it seems churlish to kind of moan about that, but that's the truth. I would recommend reading it as if you're interested in Guinea-Bissau, a small West African country with not a whole lot of published literature available to anyone who doesn't read Portuguese. So yeah, that's that one. Just after reading that, I resolved to read Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. She's a Black British woman author, as you probably know, because this book was published in 2019 and won the Booker Prize that year. And it's, again, I think that my attitude to this book has actually been coloured by the context in which I'm reading it, with the I suppose with sort of the Black Lives Matter protests, and obviously I'm always aware of racism, but that's kind of is so much to the fore in our minds this week that I guess our reading of books is always shaped by context, isn't it? We don't read them in a vacuum. We read them, and our values and ideas and perspective and experiences interact with the book, don't they? And that certainly happened very much so for me this week with this book, because it's a great book. Her style is quite poetic, which I like. It's one of those books that is almost like a collection of short stories but interconnected, so they come together. And one of the criticisms that I've read of this book, and one reason why not everyone likes it, I think, is because she uses the stories of 12 women, 12 black or mixed race, even if they don't know it, British women, or who live in Britain. Some of them have moved to Britain in their lifetime, as it were. The criticism, I guess, is that there's almost like a little bit of box ticking, kind of wanting to cover. You feel like she was wanting to cover all the different sort of varieties of experience that I guess, so I'm not putting this very well, but that's been the reaction of some readers, that she's ticking different boxes to show a sort of a range of diversity or yeah. So, and I think that this week, when I was reading it, that criticism, I felt, well, why the hell shouldn't she? If that's what she wants to do. It's like, actually, it's perfectly okay to write a novel with a sort of a definite political intention, and as long as you can pull it off, and I think she does. And I was interested. I went away and kind of read a bit, because I was thinking, it is a very kind of structured and kind of quite artificial choice to make. And this is what she said. She said, "I wanted to put presence into absence. I was very frustrated that black British women weren't visible in literature. I whittled it down to 12 characters. I wanted them to span from a teenager to someone in their 90s. And then she goes on to explain more about that in an interview with her. And yeah, actually, I felt that was a legitimate choice, and she, in kind of artistic or literary terms, she pulls it off. The other criticism that you could make of the book, and which I think I would normally have made of this of the book, is that all 12 characters are kind of in their own way successful. They're all smart, and they all kind of, to some extent, kind of come good, succeed in their lives, or not perfectly in every case, but do you know what I mean? Like, no one has a really kind of complete life that comes to nothing, if that makes sense. And a lot of them excel. Now, and why would I complain about that? Because it feels a bit sort of unbalanced, I suppose, or unrepresentative of perhaps of black British women's experience. That even the woman who gets pregnant at 16 and drops out of school, but ends up, I don't know, like being like a manager in a shop and going and doing a degree in night school. In this week's context, I think it's easy for me to understand why Evaristo chose that. You know, basically what she wanted to do was to show a challenge, but endeavour and success and achievement, and that is actually a legitimate choice. And so whereas I might have kind of felt, oh well, you know, they've all got to be brilliant and all, you know, yeah, well actually why the hell not, you know, yeah, if that's the book she wanted to write. And again, she pulls it off. I really like the structure of the book. I like the way, yeah, you could complain that you don't get to know all the characters that well because there's 12, but the way they interconnect, the way they link back together, and that by the end of the book, kind of mesh in a way that is satisfactory, and the mosaic of their experience leaves you with a deep satisfaction, I'd say, from this novel. So yeah, that it's I felt very positive about it and would enthusiastically recommend it. Yes, if you're perhaps thinking, oh, I'd like to read a novel by a Black British writer, well, you know, woman writer, yeah, go for it, it's a goodie. One of the things that she usefully addresses in the book, I think, and this goes back to that box ticking thing that I feel is an unjustified complaint about the novel, is that she is really trying to explore the concept of intersectionality. And I know that's one of those words that can kind of irritate people. You know, it's like, oh, it's like a buzzword of, oh, well, we can't just talk about race. We have to think about class and gender and sexuality and disability and, you know. But actually, I think it's really important that we do. Yeah, she really understands that and tries to build that into her novel. And my experience of, because I work in the area of disability, really emphasises to me the importance of understanding the concept of intersectionality, the sort of overlaps between different forms of discrimination or disadvantage. And yeah, it's actually something I feel quite passionate about. Say, because I work around disability, I'm not disabled myself. What I see is that ableism it's almost like where I'm trying to think how to put this kind of like without saying the wrong thing and getting it wrong. Ableism is almost where racism was, I don't know, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, in that, or particularly, things have moved a little around physical disability, but around like learning disability and sort of if you're non-neurotypical or you're a learning disabled person, the discrimination that you experience, people's attitudes towards you, is not to think that they are discriminating, but to think that it's actually normal and natural and just reasonable, that because you are learning disabled or autistic or whatever, that you are deficient, and that it is just appropriate to treat you differently and discriminate against you. Now, this is not about what Roxane Gay would say. It's not about the, you know, trying to create a hierarchy of discrimination. That's not what I'm saying. Why this is important is about intersectionality. So, from my experience, I would see, say, a child with autism at school is never going to get all the positive help and support that they need. But if they are a white child with autism, they've got a fighting chance of getting reasonable kind of understanding and support. May or may not happen, but you know, if they are also black, what I see is very often they will be treated very differently, like very like I've seen schools where, you know, good schools giving good support to some children, and the black children with additional needs getting demonised, and behaviour that would be understood and excused, or supported and help, you know, get offered help with in a white child, and a black child is seen as if they're somehow, it's intrinsically they're bad. So that's why intersectionality is so important, because you know, any child with special educational needs in the UK has a significantly raised risk of being excluded from school, and we know what exclusion from school leads on to in terms of your life chances. If you are both have additional needs and are black, your chances of being excluded are so much higher, and then the impact that has. So I suppose that's why, and I'm sure if you're black and gay, or you're black, you know, you will, again, you will appreciate the significance of that intersectionality. So that's why I suppose this is my little plea, not to treat that as some sort of trendy buzzword, but to be really really look for its impact around you, and to add that to your kind of personal commitment, I suppose, to being, I don't know, on the on the right side, on the force for good. Oh, well, that's my little homily for for BookTube. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and be strong.